Hi, good afternoon. Hi everyone. So welcome to session 9. I think before I start, I'll just like to bring up my panelists up to the stage as well. So Luciano, Maurice, and Jacque. So while our panelists are coming on stage, so hi, my name is Ain Husniza. I'm a Gen Z activist, and I'm a founder of Pocket of Pink, a feminist initiative working on in the intersection of art, advocacy, and education. So a lot of my activism work actually started from digital activism or by creating content on different platforms. But actually, the way that I came to be was something that I never planned. A video actually went viral and changed my life. And that tension between what I created and what the platform amplified it to be is something that we'll be talking a lot about today. So we have around 45 minutes together. The structure will work like this. We'll have a couple of videos from each of the panelists as well as myself, and a little bit of explanation on what it means for them, as well as 3 sections where we'll talk about firstly on what kind of relationships do we have with the platform as a user, as a content creator, as a service provider. And then secondly, we'll talk about monetization. And thirdly, the future trends on what we expect the needs of the platform itself to develop. And lastly, we'll have a Q&A session. So I want this to be conversational, and I'm really excited to see how this discussion develops. So first, let's start with the video that I wanted to show all of you. So can you start first? So I just came home from school, and today in class we were learning PJK with this male teacher. Going good, you know. We were talking about sexual harassment and how to take care of yourself, your body right. He was making a couple of jokes, but it seemed normal at first. But slowly the jokes were getting weirder and more lucha. And then we were talking about how there's a lot of laws protecting minors from sexual abuse or sexual harassment. And then he said, guess what? Kung nanti korang nak rogol, janganlah rogol yang bawah 18, korang rogol yang atas 18. He really said that, and the girls were quiet, but the boys, they were laughing. It was so funny to joke about raping someone. He even talked about how that apparently kalau boys kena rape, it doesn't get reported because the boys is apparently sedap or it feels good for them. What kind of... So much more that I want to say, but time is running out, so... Yeah, so that was back when I was 17, about 3 years ago. And I had first made that video on TikTok, and I think it's very normal for someone of my generation to kind of document our daily lives. And I think that video had 2.1 million views at the end of the day. However, I actually originally only had 47 followers. So it really shows the power that the platform had to amplify certain messages. But yeah, just to translate some of the context was that it was basically rape jokes, and I had followed up with the hashtag Make School a Safer Place movement, which was a national movement to call for the comprehensive sex education in Malaysian schools and to call out about the rape culture and abuse and the culture of sexual abuse in Malaysian schools. So that was the catapult and the trigger towards the activism work that I do today, and most of the work that I do by campaign awareness and raising more knowledge and information around feminism or maybe sexual abuse and harassment is also through content creation or video production as well, through my social media, as well as Pocket of Pink, the current feminist organization that I currently lead. But here's what I learned from that experience was that I didn't control that virality. It happened just like that. And it happens most often and more likely with young people because they are so raised by that platform. They are so raised in that environment. You don't exactly know what makes things go viral. But because I was at that point of time, I had maybe made a lot of videos
one every each day, then you kind of know, oh, this is how the platform works. This is what the platform wants. So today we're going to talk about that power imbalance. We're going to talk about this not knowingness, about what the algorithm really wants, about how your content is pushed towards certain audiences, because obviously I got some supporters from that, but I also got very heavily cyberbullied from that content as well until I was diagnosed with depression. So I am joined by 3 people who are navigating these questions every single day on how are we going through these platforms, who do they serve, how do we make the best content that reach the people that we actually want, not just cyberbullies, not just haters, as across 3 different mediums and 3 different approaches. So yeah, let's meet them. So the first person that I want to introduce is Mr. Maurice Otieno from Nairobi, Kenya. So Maurice is the Executive Director of Baraza Media Lab, a media incubator operating across the African continent, and he's been instrumental in building Kenya's media, tech, and innovation ecosystems. I think before we let Mr. Maurice talk, maybe we can see his video first.
Sorry, guys. I know you're expecting to see me produce content like Ain. I'm here to sell my product. No, I'm joking. So my name is Maurice Otieno. I'm the Executive Director of Baraza Media Lab, a platform for journalists and media folks to basically come, collaborate, learn, and share insights. And that has enabled us to basically create a space for folks within the media space to come and innovate. Now, the product that you are seeing, or the video that you are seeing, is an innovation from one of our members. Some of you might know him. He's called John Allan Namu, an investigative journalist. Now, John and a music group called Sauti Sol, for those who don't know them, they are one of the largest Kenya's export right now as a creative talent, were frustrated a lot by what they were earning from YouTube. So on average, John Allan's household, which is an investigative household, will produce about 4 pieces of content, 40 minutes long each, every week, right? And post it on YouTube as a platform for distribution. And likewise, Sauti Sol will also do the same. Now, Sauti Sol has 17 million followers. John Allan alone has 1 million followers, almost as big as a newsroom, right? Or as a news agency. But they will only earn collectively about $400 a week after producing about 4 to multiple content that will cost them about $4,000, $5,000. So they, with that frustration, created their own platform that then uses local models of payment, which is M-Pesa, which is our mobile money, and also sells content in piecemeal. And once you receive the content, you can watch it once, and you can't share it. So they figured it out on the back end. And this became a very important tool for him as an investigative journalist who cannot find corporate sponsorships to support his work, who is fighting with almost all the institutions in here for funding, right? And all bombarding IFPIM and Luminate and all their likes. While also holding power to account and risking his life while doing it. So this platform, it was put to test once when we had a very big fertilizer scandal in the country. That John Allen, sorry, that's my alarm going off. This is the time I wake up back at home, so I'm still sleeping. Sorry, I'm still sleeping, but I hope I'm coherent. So basically what happened is, after doing the fertilizer scandal that implicated a lot of senior and connected people in the country, he had two options, either to release it on YouTube, and that's it, or sell it to another newsroom who might also sometimes not bring up the story because they don't want to fight with the government, or put it up on a platform that we had just created a week ago. So I remember having a midnight call with him to figure out, should we put it on the platform? The government will come for it, we are not ready, and all that. And we said, oh, what the heck, let's put it. If it all comes to nothing, at least we put it up on the platform. In 5 hours, the video garnered about 300,000 views. It had $3,000 worth of people paying. Remember, $3,000 is the money they earn in a week. Actually, yeah, in a week after posting 4 videos. And that offered another avenue for how investigative journalists could be able to monetize, if not fully, but at least 50 to 80% of their revenue of production will come back. And that was replicated also, I'll take 2 minutes, that was also replicated with the Sauti Sol, the music group who also kept on putting their content on YouTube and not earning anything. So they joined this platform as co-founders, and they were posting a lot of their behind the scenes, and they will earn money from just showing people behind the scenes of what they're doing and producing music. And that's what I'm here to talk about, the power dynamics between creators and platforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maurice, for that. So yeah, basically creating like a new structure on how the people could actually monetize and make some kind of living from it, right? So next, I want to introduce like Jacque Manabat from the Philippines. So Jacque made history as the first journalist in Southeast Asia to actually use TikTok for news reporting. And I actually saw the video, and I saw it's like, do you see, because there's a difference in quality from TikTok back then, just like my video. So I could say, oh, that's definitely from that time. And so she's revolutionized storytelling with what she calls as an infotainment approach. So Jacque, you've also chosen a video to show. Let's see it, everybody.
There are war crimes and crimes against humanity against entire peoples. They are happening right now, and yet some do not make it onto the local agenda, not because they hurt less or because they don't matter, but because
Sorry,
for
this
the
isn't
algorithm.
Jacque's video.
I hope it was.
That was mine,
That's
actually.
Luciano's,
That
which
comes
you will
later.
see later.
We can tell some jokes.
Did you start with a viral video?
No.
No.
The one that I'm going to show doesn't feature me because I'm so humble.
Sitting right next to Ain, I feel like an auntie.
No. No, it's okay, Jacque. We can do some TikToks later.
Yeah, we can collab, huh?
Or we can see my video.
Yeah, we can.
Oh. Is it easier to see Luciano's video first? Yeah, okay, sure.
Crimes against humanity against entire peoples. They are happening right now, and yet some do not make it onto the local agenda, not because they hurt less or because they don't matter, but because for the algorithms, there are conflicts that don't pay off, and yet they exist. They devastate lives, break communities, mark the present of millions, without anyone held accountable, without justice, without anyone telling it.
Yes, so that's a feature for Mr. Luciano Banchero from Buenos Aires, Argentina. So Luciano actually co-founded Posta in 2024, which is Latin America's pioneering podcast studio. So Yeah, Luciano, since your video showed first, you're working in audio format in a world that's, increasingly visual. So I think that's really interesting to see why you've chosen that format. So if you can introduce a little bit on yourself and, particularly on your work.
Thank you. I don't want to brag, but it was actually 2014.
Oh,
so
2014.
11 years ago we started
Sorry.
making podcasts. No, that's fine, that's fine. But, everyone is coming late to the podcast party, so I just wanted to say I'm not actually humble, I'm a pioneer. So, now, really, it's an honor. It's also a bit intimidating. That's why I revert to joke mode every now and then. I come from this distant dystopia called Argentina. I'm also the winner of the person who flew more miles and more time to be here today, and it's such a pleasure. 11 years ago, we founded Posta, which in the industry, in the Latin American ecosystem for media and content, we are still seen as the weird ones, the ones that, for the one thing, make podcasts. That's the only thing we do. We don't do podcasts and newsletters. We don't do podcasts and TikTok content. We just do podcasts. We are fully committed to the format. And also weird because we actually managed to create some revenue models around that allowed us to make some money, be funded by Luminate. We were part of the Velocidad Fund a couple of years ago that was extremely transformative for the company. And a couple of years ago, we were acquired by a Swedish group called Podex, which is building the largest group of companies, of podcast companies around the world. So not without reasons, we are often seen as the weird bugs in the room. I chose this video because it's an example of the kind of collaboration that I think defines us at Posta. The guy in the video is not me, it's actually a journalist called Joaquin Sanchez Mariño, the host of it's the trailer of a show called Guerras que no garpan, which roughly translates to Wars That Don't Pay Off, which is a documentary video podcast covering armed conflicts around the world that aren't part of the public agenda because they are not considered sexy or newsworthy enough. And the purpose of Posta's narrative and journalism content is to shed light into these stories that usually go untold. And that's exactly what we are trying to achieve with this production. It just premiered. You can see it on YouTube. You can watch it subtitled. This was a very, very poor AI dubbing that I made myself. So thank you for letting me sharing that with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luciano, for that. And I think it really shows that there is certain value in specializing in content formats because you said this was actually 2014. So, and you can see now the kind of format that's like popular is actually podcast. So you saw the trend before it actually arrived.
I won't say I didn't.
Okay, so next we'll actually finally see Jacque's video.
Hello, I am Jacque Manabat, an independent journalist and a content creator. I used to work here for 17 years as a senior multi-platform journalist covering the economy and producer-writer for a number of documentary shows. That is where I learned the ropes and found my mentors. And one day, as I was scrolling through my feed, I found something very interesting.
Let me explain.
If the influencers can make the public listen to them, why can't journalists do it? So with my tripod, smartphone, and a microphone, I was the first journalist in Southeast Asia to explore vertical video for news. Found my community online and started liking it. Then I also started sharing what I learned. And I got invited by local and international organizations, online newsrooms, schools to talk about my light bulb moment because apparently it's working. Sounds amazing, right? Hence, this recognitions. So this is why this 2025 I am launching a digital media startup based on my experiences as a journalist and a content creator. This is for the young audiences. It will be a toolbox full of fact-check news and information and content creation hacks to make them more responsible and ethical content consumers and creators, and to prepare them to face tomorrow's challenges.
Thank you. Well, let me share a very personal story. I think it is my motivation. It's been in my subconscious while I was still young. I came from a poor family in the Philippines, and the only way that I could watch television is by peeking through a window of our neighbor. And they're an old couple, so they only watch the news and not cartoons. They turn it off when it's cartoons. It's bad for you, it's bad for you. Okay, and I also grew up in a household where my grandpa would always read the newspaper in print. And he would always ask me to read it because his eyes are already blurry. And then I told him, I don't understand anything in the print. I don't understand the news. Why is news not for kids? I think I should have a say in the news because it affects my life too. There's a fallen tree, electricity or the power will go out. It also affects me. I can't study when there's no power. So that is, I think, subconsciously is my motivation to always be on the lookout for how to reach the audiences, especially the young audiences. So when I was working in the traditional media, I was one of the first who used the Facebook live stream, even before the most famous troll in the Philippines. I won't say her name here. And during the pandemic, I had I had a pivot. So it was during the pandemic when the government shut us down, ABS-CBN, and I'm always afraid to pick up my phone whenever it rings because it could be the HR telling me that I'm already laid off. So whenever I go on field, some people would tell me, I don't see you on the news anymore. What's happening? What is happening in the world? Okay, so I was in quarantine one time, and then I'm scrolling through my feed, Facebook, and then I saw people sharing recipes on how to make dalgona coffee, how to take care of their plants, fitness regimen, and all of that. Why are the people, why is the public reposting and engaging with this kind of content and not the news that we are putting out? Yeah. So what I did is to download TikTok, and people were calling me crazy or weird until now. but I didn't care. So I thought, alongside the news that I created for the traditional news media that I work for, I created TikToks and cross-posted it on different platforms. And then they started engaging. So I also, during that time, I was also taking up my master's, my gosh, in a university in the Philippines. I was wondering maybe I could also look into how Marcos Jr., our now President Marcos Jr., is using TikTok. And I discovered that he reinvented himself on TikTok. TikTok has users that were not born during the martial law. So it was a perfect blank canvas. And the young users there, if you look at the population in the Philippines, the voting population, more than 60% are young voters, are the young generation. How can we reach them when the government had shut down the news organization that I worked with? And then, of course, personal, I still want to keep my job. So that's when I started TikTok, and I became more me. So I shed off that serious demeanor of a reporter. We're now here at Ctrl+J International. And now, hey, we're here at Ctrl+J International. So I have become more me. And I discovered that I could be fun and informative as well. So I retired because I'm more than 17 years, kid, in journalism. And then I put up my own studio just last year. And it was a leap of faith. It was a gamble for me because all of my retirement pay is there. My mom is like, like Asian moms are. I hope you just had, your cousin is a doctor or a nurse. And now you gambled all of your retirement pay in a studio that you're not sure it's going to work. But folks, it is working. And it's still a work in progress. I confidently could say that I earn more than when I was a traditional journalist. And I feel that giving back to the community that also supported and served me is that for my first year, which was last year, for my first year of retirement, I went around public schools to teach journalism. I could see in them the young girl, me, peeking through a window, trying to get the news, trying to be involved in current events. So yeah, so that's my story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackie, on that. I think you touched on a really important narrative about like how we actually viewed all these platforms, because there was a point of time where people viewed TikTok as like what, a lip syncing, a dancing platform for young people, and then suddenly it's kind of changed into this very major platform where young people are actually consuming major news from. So I think that was also for me, and I think it touched upon this fundamental question onto our next session, which is like, how do you see your relationships within these platforms? Are you a passive consumer, or are you someone that's like actively creating content? And I'll be honest, like after my video went viral, I realized that as a young person, I didn't just have to be a user of the platform. I can actively contribute to the platform. However, my content, my data, the monetization that the platform was making of my content was something that I didn't really have power onto. So I think this touches upon my next question to all the three of you, which is like, do you see yourself as a brand, as a product, and is your content a service, or is it more complicated than that? And I think more specifically, I'll continue on to Maurice, because I want to ask, how are you working with all of these like different creators, right? There's different approaches throughout the African continent, which I assume has massive audiences, but often struggle with monetization. And you touched upon earlier how they made like 3,000, right? And I want to know, like, if you can go in deeper, how does that process go to? How do you find the creators? Maybe do you go vetting, and then like what kind of content, and how do you know what content actually gets the people to pay, and how does the platform, react with that?
Okay, I think I'll start with the relationship between the creators and the platforms. So first of all, most of the content creators that we work with within the lab, to be honest, for lack of a better word, do not really care how the platforms are governed. They mostly care about earning. That's their first priority. If I earn, in fact, there was a time that some of the organizations we were working with were really advocating for better working conditions for content moderation or content moderators. But the content creators at that time were like, oh, that's not our problem. You know, they're like, we just want to earn our money. But the power that they do have is that they do create the content that brings people to that platform, right? So the way you find platforms like YouTube, they calculate something called CPMs, is very prejudiced. So for countries like Kenya, where I come from, you find a content creator similar to someone who's in London will probably be earning 5 times less, because YouTube does not have a lot of clients in Kenya, right? So you earn less. But then you still create the same content, like the person who's based out of London. What we've tried to do and what we've seen people do is to start creating their own platforms and using their own reach on these other platforms to push people to their platform. So for example, there's a podcasting platform called Wazo that we've also incubated at the lab. And what they do is basically say, if you're a creator, you can create your content, put it on our platform, and you'll get to earn directly from your consumers, almost like a tip jar. Mm-hmm. And the reason why this is exciting is because these platforms are creating their own pathways of payments, which are more contextualized to Kenya. I mean, card payments are not very ubiquitous in Kenya. They are not a thing, depending on where you are. If you're in the touristy part, you'll pay via card, right? But if you're in the 99% of Kenya is cash or M-Pesa. So they're using this platform to say, oh, why don't you tip me using M-Pesa on this tip jar? So you find most of what the creators will do, they'll go to the platform that earns them the money, but they'll go and find reach on the platforms that do not earn them money. So they'll go on this platform and say, come to this platform and see my content. And that's how they earn to keep their work going. So our relationship with them is basically to figure out how to innovate around the business models, and also to understand that, for example, because we also do work with journalists, also to understand that there are three distinct roles. So, for example, there's journalism, there is storytelling, and there's communications. The reason why I'm saying that is because while we do our research, we find like most people who talk about content creation just assume that it's journalists who can do all these three things. But there's a clear intersection of journalism, or actually where journalism and storytelling comes in together, like what you said, Jacque. We've also noticed that most content creators are now working with mainstream media to tell stories and go deeper on particular issues that journalists are reporting. So as a journalist, I report there was an accident at this place. Then a storyteller will tell you the story of how that accident happened. And then the storytellers mostly drive engagement. People engage with them, they resonate with them, while the journalist side, we've seen, mostly drives reach. So you drive the million people have seen this, but in really for real engagement, we've seen most storytellers who are working to just basically engage their audience. And that's how we kind of work with both to kind of define how they could work together, but also what their roles are within the information space.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think I want to tie this into maybe Luciano's experience on like how he monetized, and also like how you kind of saw the trend within audio-focused content format, and also maybe if you can also share like how do you compete with like the current video formats as well, and if you have any pointers onto how you think that maybe the focus will change in the next few years. Yeah.
I don't think we have enough time for me to say all the things I need to say regarding that, but I'll try to keep it brief. Regarding platforms, I 100% agree with what Maurice said. We had a fluctuating relationship, sometimes myself confrontative with the platforms. I even wrote a post on LinkedIn against Spotify, which was our main client. But I believe in speaking truth to power, which almost got me banned from my own company. But we've been over that. The reason was why it was because I think we learned to be cautious in our relationship with platforms. I think we've learned to treat platforms more like bridges than homes. We've lived through a cycle where there was this big investment from platforms like Spotify that did this aggressive push to promote themselves as the podcast listening platform in Latin America, which they did by investing in more than 50 podcasts, of which Posta produced like 10 of them. So we certainly benefit from that. But at the same time, they kept the intellectual property. And once the strategy changed and they ended their investments, none of those rights reverted to the creators. So, as I said, learning to be cautious, using the platform strategically while investing in what we truly own, which is the property, the IP, the data, and the audience, the communities. In terms of how we started Posta, I think it started with from a point of view of what was lacking. There was this flourishing industry in the United States in 2014, which was known as the second boom, the second wave of podcasting with Serial, Startup, and all those big narrative journalism podcasts. And being myself a journalist and coming from a radio background, I said, why isn't there something like this for Spanish-speaking markets? Why isn't there anything like this in Argentina? So we started building it. And at some point we said, well, we have to make it. The plan was never to make money or make ourselves the Latin American podcast millionaires, but to try to build a healthy and sustainable business. And that's why we started, we said, okay, why don't we use all the creativity, the talent, and the team, our expertise that we're using to produce all these original podcasts in service of other companies, media companies, platforms, and media partners. We've done a podcast for, well, as you've seen, Amnesty International. We've done podcasts with Chequeado, which is a big fact-checking organization in Latin America, with big media outlets worldwide like Vice. and also with big brands like Uber and Microsoft. In all of those, we try to use a journalistic approach, and we try to think ourselves as storytellers. We try to tell the stories of the brand. So that's pretty much, in a very, very synthesized way, how we ended up making money out of podcasts. And I don't remember the third question, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's just like, how do you think the
how
next
it's going to evolve.
the next trend will be?
Yeah, to keep it short and clickbaity, I think even though we are currently in a video bubble, we are actually producing video podcasts as well. Actually, I think 90% of our output this year is video podcast.
Yeah.
We always think audio first. And I think the future is still audio first. I think we're going to get so exhausted of screens that we will eventually become a screen-free culture, and audio is going to prevail in that new culture.
I think that's really interesting because right now we do have a term for that. It's called brain rot. Like,
Absolutely.
the young generation is kind of actively pushing away these short video content. And to jump off one word you spoke about earlier, which is clickbait, I want to continue off Jackie. So my question is particularly, so at this year's Asian Conference for Political Communications in Singapore, you reflected on how platforms can influence the direction of public conversations. And as a journalist whose work is mainly on the platform, do you feel like you have agency to actually influence the conversation? And why I mentioned specifically the word clickbait, because even me personally, is when I want to make a video, I have to balance between making it clickbaity or like factual, you know? So yeah. So because sometimes it's like if you make it like so dry and boring, like you don't actually get the viewers that you want. Yeah.
All right, we have to think of it this way. Journalists are content creators. We are also influencers, even though the word influencers just came recently. We are. I mean, we have to embrace that. It's just that the platforms are changing, the way we do things are changing, but the ethics remain. Now with clickbait, I think of them as headlines. So we do write headlines that are clickbaity. We have to admit that. And yes, is it still journalism? I see journalism nowadays, not just the profession, but the function. So right now, I am mentoring journalists, I am mentoring content creators, and I am bridging that gap. I feel that I am bridging that gap. How journalists could resonate to the young audiences like you, and how content creators could gain skills like fact-checking, attribution, proper sourcing, and etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, so do you feel like you have the agency to kind of like influence that? For example, do you feel that certain ways that you create your videos is limited to what the algorithm pushes through on the platform?
Of course,
Yeah.
the algorithm is always there. It's volatile. That's why I would encourage you not to be dependent on the platforms. So what I did was to build an entrepreneur, my studio, on top of the platform. So don't limit yourself to platforms. It's also part of a diversification of where we could get our money, our profits. So don't think like a journalist, you also think like an entrepreneur, because it's hard to write a story on an empty stomach. How would you write a story that matters if you're hungry? If you can't go to this place because you don't have funds. So that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Trina, do we have time or we have to? Okay. Okay, yeah.
You can ask us some questions later while we're
Yeah,
talking.
so I'm so sorry, everyone. We're supposed to have like a Q&A session. However, I think our conversation today really synthesized like a lot of the different things and factors that we actually need to consider in terms of like when we want to, monetize on different platforms or actually manage to, jump on different platforms and, deal with the criterias, with the different content formats. So currently, platforms have majority of the power. As journalists and as creators or as activists, we have to know how to, slide between the lines, how we can do certain things and actually manage to leverage onto the platform there. But like from all of the creators here, from all of the amazing panelists that we have here, we know that it's possible. It's possible to monetize. It's possible to empower a community, and it is so possible for you to do amazing journalism work while being yourself and while making TikToks. So I think we are ending on a hopeful note. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask our panelists, because I'm sure that our conversations did not manage to cover all of the amazing experiences that they have. But I just want to thank all of the panelists here so far. Thank you so much for allowing me to moderate you and this conversation. And I think personally, as a young person, I've also learned a lot from everything that you've shared so far, and the work that you are doing and continuously do is amazing. Thank you.